good to have everybody in today. We're honored to have you join us, and just welcome. It's early. I was telling everybody if I have to wear my hat, then that means that I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. So, but we're glad you're with us today. It's always a good day to get charged up with some scripture and remind us of certain things that are important in our life, and we certainly do that here. I enjoy getting up. What is it? I get up at 4:30. I know you guys are getting on with your day and getting ready and for work, etc. I think it's spring break. I'm not sure if that's not true or not, but I appreciate you guys being on. It is an early hour. I wanted to read. I'm not sure if I'm going to read it. It comes from Matthew 20. It's about the workers in the vineyard, and it's Matthew 20 verses 1 through 16. It's a long one though. I'll read it real quick. I'm going to fly through this. I'll read this to you. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day, and he sent them into the vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in the vineyard, and I will pay you what is right." So they went. He went out again about noon, and about 3 in the afternoon, he did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all the day doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "Go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the foreman, "Call the workers and pay their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going to the first." And the workers that were hired 5 in the afternoon came in and received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. And when they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "Those who were hired last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who bore the burden of the work in the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I will give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Are you envious because I'm generous?" So the last will be first and the first will be last. Okay, I screamed through that. No, did not read that with passion or in anything. just screamed through it. But it is a great parable, all right? And it comes on the heels of Peter asking in Matthew 19:27, "What then will we have?" And they're talking about, we've left everything, we've done all of this. What is our reward going to be? And there is this reversal sort of motif in Jesus' ministry. The first will be last, the last shall be first. Love your enemy. They deserve love and forgiveness. How many times do we forgive? Not 7 times, but 77 times. So wherever there's a limit, Jesus takes the limit off. Wherever there seems to be a hierarchy, Jesus reverses the hierarchy. And so there's always this reversal. But that's kind of what the kingdom of heaven is like. Even, John the Baptist, who, just had nothing. He's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, Jesus says. You'll find none greater. And I think for us, when we start looking at our lives, a lot of what we, Sherry and I touched on this yesterday in our podcast. It is a performance-based walk with Christ. It seems like. If we do good things, we'll get good things. And that's not at all what the kingdom of heaven looks like. In fact, that's not how God deals with us at all. It was, the scriptures tell us that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense that Christ would die for us while we were yet still sinners. But that's the reason he comes. He comes for the sick. He comes for the lost. He comes for those that need a physician. and that means all of us. All right, and I think that if we go back even further into the way the Jews were doing it during Jesus' time and even before, it seems to be a performance-based relationship. In other words, if I did something good, I know that God. We'll just look at the blind man, or look at the man who was lame. Look at the leper. That they believed that they had done something to deserve the infirmity, that they were paying for past sins. They were teaching this, and so, so again, performance-based. And so to get out of that, well, there was nothing they could do to get out of that. If the blind man was blind and couldn't get, his sight back, then he was still being punished. And of course, he couldn't get his sight back because he's blind. They didn't have the ability to do that, even, medically. And so he was going to always be judged for doing something his father did or that he did. There's no way out of it. But, the Jew was given a way out to sacrifice, and to sacrifice an animal. And if you sacrifice, repent and sacrifice, then you will be back in that relationship. Well, eventually that sin caught up with them, and they started they forgot the heart part, and they just sacrificed an animal because they know they could get out of that, sinful behavior and be seen by God as righteous again. But God sees the heart, and so their heart never changed. They just were sacrificing animals, again, performance-based. All right, and so I think that, here you have, literally workers going into the vineyard to perform for a day's wage, to earn something. And Jesus uses this, just a beautiful example. And he's calling people at all hours of the day into the vineyard to get a day's wage, a denarius. And it's interesting that he even finds people at the very end of the day that haven't done anything, the 11th hour. And they've done nothing. And yet Jesus sets them up to pay them from the person that's been hired the last and has done the least amount of work to be paid first. He does it so that the others can see what he's doing. And of course, they do what we would do. They grumble. They don't grumble yet. In their mind, they see the guy get a full day's wage for doing nothing. They certainly think they're going to get exponentially paid more, and they still get the same amount. And so they grumble. First thing I want you to hear is that God uses people, and I've learned this, and I don't like it, but I've learned it, that God uses all sorts of different people at all different seasons. All right. And he's asking people to do something for the kingdom, it with different gifts and at different times. All right. And I think that for me, I know that some people decide to follow God at an early age. And well, let's just back up just 1 second. So they get the same denarius, and the men grumble. And Jesus says, why are you grumbling? Can't I be generous with my money? And I choose to be generous with it. I choose to give. I choose to give these men that were in the last, that have done nothing. I choose to give them the same amount of money. So the metaphor here is this, is that God's love, no matter what, is for everybody. It's for the sinner on the cross who has done literally nothing right. He is getting punished because he deserves death, and yet Jesus opens up the kingdom to him. You've got, Peter, who betrayed him at the very end. He opens up the kingdom for him. His love is the same. His love is the same for the righteous and for the ones that are ungodly. All right. And thank goodness it's that way, because a lot of us still haven't entered the vineyard in a lot of ways. Remember, the laborers are few, the vineyard is huge, Jesus says, but the laborers are few. A lot of people don't hear the call until late in life. They miss it. They've lived their life for themselves. They've lived their life for to do only for themselves, and yet, thanks be to God that He still opens up the kingdom as He did for these workers at the 11th hour. But it makes me look now at people differently. Unfortunately, the men who were in the vineyard working hard looked down the line and saw these people hadn't done anything, yet got paid the same wage. In other words, were allowed in, and they grumbled because of that. And I think that's, what I've learned, and getting back to my point, what I've learned is that we are all called by God to do different things, different hours of our life. All right. And I think that when people look at the person on the cross who says, he doesn't even know how to spell Jesus, all he just says is, remember me when you get into your kingdom, affirming that somehow he is the king of something. And Jesus says, you'll be with me in paradise. I mean, does that rub you the wrong way for somebody who's worked their entire life, maybe who's gone into the mission field, who's done? I mean, I've seen Christians behave horribly towards one another. They take they try to put a bushel over somebody's gifts. They try to hide. They try to hide that person's gifts. They try to stop that person from rising to new heights. They God-given things that they just try to destroy. And I think that when we look at each other, instead of looking down the line as maybe somebody who's different, or whose gifts are different, whose talents are different, who is obviously being used by God to do something, I think we need to be able to celebrate that instead of hate that. God is never late. He's intentional. All right. And you might be thinking, where am I to be used? You might be thinking that right now. God is not late in your life. He is intentional. I think that now you might choose not to answer the call. You might be waiting there, and he comes to you and says, why are you here? Let's go work. And you might say, no, not going to do it. No, I'm not ready. Those are your choices. You can watch things go by. You can watch your life go by. You can watch all the moments that God is asking you to go into the vineyard and work and miss it. It's interesting that the other men probably saw those same guys going into the vineyard or waiting on the side of the road to be hired. They didn't say anything to anyone about that. They just wanted their money. In fact, they probably were like, I don't want this guy to take my place. So I think what can happen is, and what can, we're all on different trajectories. My trajectory is totally different than yours, and I would not wish mine on anybody else. And I've been given this lot in my life, the very short life that I have, because this is my lot. This is what God chose for me to do. But I couldn't do what Jeff does, or I certainly couldn't do what Dave Bodney does. I couldn't do a lot of things that some other men and women are qualified to do. And I think it's about keeping your eye on what God has called you to be and do. Looking down the line, it does not help. It makes us covet, makes us jealous, and it causes grumbling. It for sure causes grumbling. So and when it does that, I've stopped seeing how I can help other people. What happens there is I start to see how maybe I will undermine other people. And when in Matthew 20:11, it says they grumbled. And I think that part of my journey is to enjoy the kingdom, the vineyard that God has put in front of me. It's not easy work. It's not glamorous work. But it's legacy work. It's work that changes people's lives. And I'm supposed to enjoy that, but grumbling steals joy. All right? And when you compare what other people are doing in your life, I promise you're going to, instead of enjoying the blessing, you're going to start creating the complaint. All right? Comparison always leads to complaints. All right? And I need, and that's, and really what what I think God was hoping would happen is this, that everybody got paid the same, and the workers looked at the guys down the line and said, wow, aren't you lucky? That's fantastic. You've won the lottery today. It's not going to happen every day, but today it did happen. And you know what? They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't exchange names. They didn't exchange phone numbers. They didn't do any of that. All they did was divide. They didn't offer the guy a ride to the work in the morning. All they did, instead of celebrating somebody's success, in ministry, I can't tell you how many people I thought were completely undeserving of appointments and success in ministry, because I knew their heart. They were given it because of not what they had done before, and not based on their hard work before, but just based on opportunity. They had found the right people to get in the circle with. They had created the things, and but eventually that all so what I'm saying is jealousy's real. That's a real thing. I've succumbed to it in my ministries. I've been jealous of other people. I've compared myself to other people. But I realize that when I do that I absolutely, all the joy that I could experience in what God was doing with me was stolen by me comparing myself to somebody else. All right. And eventually that leads to very negative things, especially if you're working closely with somebody else. I mean, I've seen people undermine pastors. I've seen people undermine CEOs, managers, bosses, you name it. I've seen people do the most horrible things to other people because of the grumbling, because of the comparison, and the lies, the gossip. It's insidious, and so. And this is the thing, more than likely, you're not vocalizing this. You're silently competing with somebody else or something else. There's just that, you wake up and you're like, why? It's almost like George Bailey and his buddy, remember in It's a Wonderful Life, the hee-haw guy. He went off and he went to college, and he's calling from a place in an office where he's dressed in a tux. He's got champagne on his desk. He's made it. And George Bailey is still, at the building and loan in his rundown house, rundown car. In fact, his friend comes up in a stretch limo with a driver, and George has to get back in his sort of beat up old jalopy, whatever it was. There's comparison, man. But George is reminded by his brother at the end of the movie what? He makes a toast, and he says, to the richest man in Bedford Falls. I think that was the line. And George, up until the very last moment of his life, realized that he was the richest man, not because of what he owned, and not because of how successful he was, but how generous he was. Just as Jesus is generous to us, just to the enemy, to the people he didn't like, to the people he was always helping, always giving, always finding a way to be used in the vineyard. And there's this place where, he's reminded of it. In fact, he tries to kill himself because of the jealousy and the comparison. Just can't take it any longer. Where are you silently competing? All right, and that's a big deal. That's a big question for you to ask yourself. And the more we silently compete, the less we get done in our own lives, and that can be, that certainly can that can be a challenge and a negative one. But for me, I think it boils down to, literally just recognizing the generosity of God, the love of God. And I think that this, for me, might be the most uncomfortable thing, because God literally is that unconditional, that I don't deserve that love, but that this is a love that I don't earn, that I don't work for. This is a love that simply I accept and that I walk with. And I need you to understand that this is not something that God doesn't look at you and keep the little black book. The cross took care of all of that. What that love does, though, is it does change us. The guy in the vineyard that came at the last day, I'm going to bet you money he was the first one to show up the next day. He saw the generosity of the master's heart, and I bet he showed up waiting to open the door, slept on the front door of the business, waiting to be let in. That kind of generosity, that kind of love changed his heart. I would bet you money. And it does change our hearts. Not to be performance, not so that we can impress, it changes. God's love changes us and makes us see everything upside down. Just like Jesus lined them up. You would have thought he would have given the guy that worked the hardest the first, the day's wage first, but he doesn't. It's the last shall be first and the first shall be last. That's how he ends the parable. And that's how we start seeing things, because of God's love, because of his generosity, because he sees us in that way. Undeserving. Sin makes us undeserving of this kind of love, but the cross makes us, it justifies us, wipes the slate clean. That kind of love allows us now to walk not in what we didn't do or did, or the mistakes we made, or any of those things. We just accept this beautiful gift that God has given us, this grace, this mercy. And this grace and mercy isn't a one-time event. It's a forever and for the rest of our life thing, that even when we do continue to make mistakes, and even if we do continue to habitually offend, guess what? There's a God that still loves us. An inconceivable concept, grace. But that grace is supposed to change us. And here's where that gets tricky. When it changes us, it changes our heart and our eyesight. Again, it begins to see those that are last instead of those that are first. It begins to see those people that are, especially in business, people that it's not what they can do for. We don't see people that can just do for us. I hope I said that right. Often in business, the world teaches you. I mean, this is how, wolf packs are formed. This is how groups are formed, because they do things to enhance the group. They do things that they have talents that make the group better. Civilizations are formed this way. You have some that are warriors. You have some that are cooks. You have some that go out and hunt food. Some reproduce. All these different gifts and qualities make the tribe stronger. But not so with Jesus. Jesus is, if we saw Jesus' tribe, it was nothing but a bunch of people that were blind, hated, infirmed, sick and just discarded by life and society. And Jesus offers them the keys to his heart. And I think that, that's how God's love, it works. It is supposed to change our eyesight. It's supposed to change how we love one another, how we look at one another. The unnoticed matters. The latecomer is always welcome. The humble are elevated. The weakest is held closer. And I think I think the one quality that it gives us is this: humility. I think this grace, this love gives us just a humble heart, a heart that every day we should be surrendering to God, a heart that we should be sacrificing for God, a heart that we should be selflessly giving to others for God. Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you. And so maybe we should just start staying faithful in our season. Maybe we should just stop comparing our life to others. Maybe we should let go of entitlement and our rights, like what we think is fair. And maybe we should start just living in God's grace and generosity. And not only just living in it to take it for ourselves, but that it changes us so that we might share it with others. Because really, when we allow God's grace to do what it's supposed to do, it is active, it is alive, and it's about changing our lives once and for all. And when that happens, we have to go out and share it with other people. We have to. And that's what the worker failed to do. That's what the workers in the vineyard failed to get. That the generosity was an amazing thing that the master had instead of something that was negative. By the way, the prodigal son's brother could not get that either. He grumbled when the son comes home and the father says, your son was once lost and now is found, once was dead and now alive. The brother doesn't care. He's mad that the father would kill the fatted calf and restore him just because he said, forgive me. The father's grace and love restored a human being, and yet the brother could not celebrate it. And that's where you have to think about where you're living your life. Are we celebrate? Look at politics. I mean, look at that grumbling on both sides of the aisle. Look at the grumble, and look how it festers. And I don't care what you believe politically, ideologically. I mean, come on, you can't celebrate some things on the other side. Just some things, just one thing. No, can't do it because of hatred, because of just power, resentment. And so that can embrace our hearts. That can seep into our hearts in a very negative way. Think about this parable. Let it come into your heart, and remember, we are always that last one, and by God's grace, given another day to serve and to love. All right, I'm going to let you guys go. I'm going to let you into your day. Your vineyard is waiting for you. Let me pray for you and send you out into it. Here we go. Father in heaven, gracious God, just thank you for this day. Thank you for the men here. Thank you for their willingness to want to work for you. You call us in, and a lot of times it's late before we answer the call. Today, Father, let us answer the call in grace and love. Let us share that with those that are last and those that are the least, and especially those that are lost, that they might discover a God of grace and a God of generosity, a God of unconditional love for them. And when they do, may it change their hearts. May it change their hearts as it changed ours. So, Father, let these men be a light for you. Let them love their families. Let them love their communities and bring them back to worship you. We ask this always in Christ's name, and we say together, amen. Guys, much love to y'all. Can't wait to see you next week. Y'all be good. Call me if you need.